Good morning. We're here for our last webinar of the series of the remote teaching and learning. And here's the topic for today is Kompromof, and that is with Angelique and Martin. Thanks for being with us here today. I'll pass it over to you to get us started for today. Thanks.
Thanks. Welcome on this webinar. I will guide you through comparative judgment, and then Angelique will give you an example of a best practice of the formative use of Komproved. Okay, let's kick. Presentation, come on. Voila. If you want access to a demo of our Komproved, then you can scan this code and leave your name and email address, and then I can give you access to an assessment after the webinar, so you can go look and experience yourself. I give you some time to scan if you like. Okay.
We can also make this scan available to you later on. So if you want to later on do this, that's fine as well.
No problem. Okay. Good. I will start with a question. The question is, how dark is the following square on a scale from 1 to 10? Just pop up a number. And what do you think of this one? The same question for another thing. How good is the following paper on a scale from 1 to 10? So now normally you have to read the paper and then you have to grade it. Most of the time people say, oh, this is difficult. What is the scale? Normally we use rubrics or criteria or something that we can rely on. We think that rubrics and criteria are a good exercise, thinking exercise to think about the competence, to deduct the components of the competence, to structure feedback, and so on. But for the use of assessment, we think it's not that useful. And therefore, we rely on what we found in the literature. So if we observe, or you observe or see people or talk to people who are working with rubrics or criteria, they often state, okay, I don't understand what this means. Sometimes they're ignoring some aspects of criteria. If you ask them what their interpretation is of a certain criteria, then it's sometimes completely different to others in the session. They use their own criteria, have different weightings, different grades, and most of the time people use it as a justification of their gut feeling. So they read a paper, get a feeling of, okay, this is such a grade, and then they will fill in the rubric or the criteria, so it confirms their beliefs. These findings in the literature were the starting point for our research project of DPAC. And that's also because we found that grading of marking was difficult. So you have different characteristics in assessors. You know, the one is very strict. The other one is more kindly. You have some teachers who will not give more than a 7 out of 10. The other think, okay, the scale is 10, so 10 is possible. You have people who are fond of some principles. For instance, the language teacher in Dutch let not pass the DT faults. If you start rating on 20 or 30 papers, then you're a different person at the end of the session. So you will rate differently than at the start. there is evidence that if we change the order of the papers, then also the grades will change. So there is a lot of evidence to state that marking is difficult, that it leads to poor inter-rater reliability, that you can ask questions about the validity, and although it's time consuming. So all those findings were the starting point of our research project, TPAC, and we just thought, okay, can there be maybe a solution? There were some indications that comparative judgment could help, so we looked into comparative judgment for 5 years with 4 PhDs and so on, to just see, okay, will this help us to get more reliable and more valid judgments. So what is comparative judgment? Instead of presenting you one square, we present two squares next to each other, and we change the question, not how dark is it, but which of the two is the most dark or the darkest. So I think now everyone will state, okay, this is the one on the left-hand side, and this is very easy to do. And this principle we transfer to students' work. So in this slide, you see 2 papers of students. And now the question is, which of the 2 texts is the best? You can do it also with images. In this case, which of the 2 face masks is the most creative, or with 2 videos, or whatever you like. So you choose as an assessor between those 2, which one is the best, and you get a lot of pairs to choose in. So you only state, okay, this one is better than the other one. You make multiple of those judgments. You're not doing this alone. Your colleagues or other assessors are also making those kind of judgments. So one paper of a student will appear in different pairs by different assessors. So more than one assessor will look to the paper. And out of those judgments, we can calculate a rank order from the lowest quality to the highest quality. What did we found in the research project was that for summative use, the reliability of was much higher than the more common ways of grading by rubrics or criteria. It was a valid method because of there is multiple assessors that looks at the products. It's efficient if you are interested in high reliabilities, and you have some rich data where you can which tell you more than just a grade. During the project, we also discovered that it was very useful in the formative use. So we found out that there was an increased task comprehension if you use comparative or those comparisons in the beginning of the classes. And as a teacher, it's more easy to detect the knowledge gaps between within the students, because they are talking about the comparison and why is the one better than the other one, and then you can adjust the reference of the students. Seeing a lot of examples results in a great learning effect. At the end, you get better products. The feedback is more on higher order aspects of the competence, and you have a lot of feedback from multiple perspectives. What is just happening with comparative judgment? I give you an example of an comparison. So you see two texts. The assignment here was to write an informative letter on what a school is in the 5th and the 6th year of basic primary education. So the students wrote their text, and the main goal was to give information to a stranger so he could understand what a school is. So we see in the right, on the right hand side, text 2 had a lot of information, more information than the text on the left hand side. So in this case, I would choose 2 to be the better text. In another comparison by me or by someone else, text 2 appears again. It has a lot of information. Now we have to compare it to text 3, which has also a lot of information. So based on the information, it's difficult to make a judgment. So we have to look to another thing, and then I see, if I go to the right, I see text 2 is talking about primary school, kindergarten, primary, kindergarten, primary, kindergarten, secondary. Okay, and then I go to the left-hand side, and I see is an alinea on kindergarten, alinea on primary, alinea on secondary, alinea on college and university. So the left-hand side, text 3, there is more structure. I can, if I'm interested in secondary school, I don't have to read the whole text again to find out where he's talking about. Secondary school, I can just pop into that alinea. So it's more clear, consistent for me. So based on this, I will prefer text 3. So in that manner, you're building up your quality reference scheme. So it's bottom up, you experience it and you see it very concrete. So the reliability is higher because of so a comparison is natural, it's easy, and you have a concrete reference point. It's not something abstract, but you can just see it in the other text. It's valid because you have a multi-rater perspective, and the quality of the reference scheme is built up bottom up. And the same is for formative use. As students have a concrete reference point, so they it's more easy for them to grasp the difference between those two texts instead of comparing it to a very abstract rubric, which leads to a lot of different interpretations and so on. Also for them, it's easily built up what it is a good versus a bad text. Why is the one good? Why is it better? They just have to look to another criteria to make the differentiation between the two texts. They see a lot of examples, and reflection is triggered. So they see things that are good, and then they want to know, oh, if it's already in my text, how can I incorporate it into my text? Okay, this one is making such faults. Do I make myself those faults or not? So that's the mechanism of comparative, to make comparisons. And we also improved at another learning opportunity, and you see here the rank order. And for instance, I'm the second paper. Then so I'm the second paper. So I'm in the middle of the group, and I can do better. So I can now look to better papers. For instance, I go to this one, I click on the paper, I can read the paper, I can read the feedback. So I can see what the gap is between and what I should do to write the gap and to become better and better and better. This was a brief and short introduction to comparative judgment. Maybe there are some questions about it, so you're free to ask if you want me to address your questions.
Thanks for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions to get us started off on this? I'm curious if anyone's used the tool. Marcel?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Thanks very much. Wait, I'm trying to turn on my camera. Hi. Thanks very much. Very interesting presentation. My first question would be about the practical side of having multiple raters. How does that impact the workload of that? Does that mean that then if multiple people rate that it involves more work, I assume, on the teacher's side, because multiple people have to go over the same text.
Okay, you're asking it for summative use, I guess. So
Yes,
if
it is.
only teachers do the
Yes.
comparisons. That's a very difficult question, and it's, the answer is not that straightforward. Yes and no. You have to read those texts multiple times, but a comparison will take. Sometimes it will take just seconds. If you're in a comparison between text on the left-hand side of the rank order and the end and the top, then it's very easy. Then you see it at a glance. Okay, this one is better, so you have to click it. You don't have to analyze it fully because you know that the text will be judged on other criteria when it's compared to other text by other people. So your judgment is not that, your single judgment is not that important in comparison to a normal grading. If you read it, you mark it, you put a number on it, then you have to be very sure. Now you can rely more on your expertise and just see, okay, this one is better, and so we move to the next pair, and then the same text will pop up in another comparison where it's not that easy anymore to make a quick decision, and then you have to look more in depth into the text. So we found out that most of, in general, it's more or like the same time investment. But that's also a difficult comparison because the creation of rubrics and the training of rubrics and the calibration is most of the time not calculated by teachers. So they only see, okay, I get my papers, I start marking, and then I stop the time. That will be probably quicker. But if you calculate the time of creating, training, calibration, and so on, then comparative judgment will be more efficient. Certainly, if you are interested in high reliabilities. So if you use rubrics, and most of the time the rubrics are created by teachers themselves or not psychometrically justified or research on those items and so on, then the reliability is between 0.20, 0.40 on a scale from 0 to 1. If you do the same time in comparative judgment, then you will have a reliability of 0.70. So the big gain is in the reliability of the results, not in the time. Now we are working on things to make it faster, so that we can fix the most informative pairs next to each other. But that's there will be a PhD on, so that's our work for the next 2-3 years to find out if we can speed up the process.
Thank you.
We have many more questions, Maarten.
Yes, no problem.
So I think Juliette, you were one of the first to start talking, and then your mic was muted. So what's your question?
No, I was not the first. I think Leonie and Marcel were before me. So if they want to go ahead, and I'll wait.
I think it's
Thank
fine.
you.
Just ask your
Yeah?
question.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, maybe we have the same question. Thank you, Maarten, for this very interesting presentation. I can see how you can make this comparison when you have a quite brief text, so you can at a glance see for yourself which of the text is the better one.
Mhm.
What I'm wondering about is how does this work with bigger texts, let's say 2,000 words or even more? How can you assess, how can you compare two texts? And for instance, in one text you think, well, the introduction is well, but the conclusion is really bad. And in the other text it's just the other way around. So how do you go about that when you have to compare them?
You just have to choose what you think is overall the better text. So I also hear the question, how big can the text be? Also difficult to answer. There were some assessments with texts of 70, 80 pages. So there were proposals to an innovation project, and they are well structured. So the more they're structured, the more that it is easy to find that information where you will decide on. So if you have, for instance, the proposals, then you look at the initial idea. Is the initial idea stupid or not relevant? Then okay, it doesn't win, so the other one will win. So if you see two projects with a relevant idea, then maybe you go looking to the budget. Okay, this is overrated, so we cannot pay this. Okay, the other one will win. So that will go very quick, although it's a lot of pages. If you have some self-reflection and they just wrote 4 pages like that, then it's more difficult because it's not structured, and you don't see at a glance, okay, they followed Korthagen, the 4 phases, yes or no. Where is the first one, where's the last one? That's difficult. So if you give them a little structure of little guidance, okay, use Korthagen, but divide the paper into the 4 phases, then it's more easy for you to find your way in those texts. On the other hand, it's more possible in comparative judgment to make the assignment more open, because there is no rubric you have to fit in. So you have to find the balance between those two. But I agree on things that are very visible, then it's very quick. So sometimes they use footage or personal branding, so a CV, but just like a poster, then it's very, very, very quick. But most of the time it's used for writing assignments.
I will have an example of that as well later on, Juliette, about how we use the program to Delft.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe Fokko, because I see that you raised your hand first, actually, after.
So I'm a math teacher, and I was wondering whether you can do something like this with math questions where there is at least an objective correct answer. So you have the easy question like what is 1 + 1, and I guess that's it won't help. But if you have to give a proof of a theorem, then some students will still do that completely correctly, and that's easy to grade anyway. But the ones where they make mistakes, would something like this work as well?
Yeah, in maths, it's more suitable for those things like problem solving. So, like you state, when it's correct or objective correct, or like a dictate or something like that, you don't have to compare. When you can grade it easily, then a comparison will have no added value. But if you go to problem solving and you just give a problem and you're seeking for some creativity use of math, then a comparison kicks in and will add you more than just a rubric, because it's very difficult to make a rubric on that occasion. So when it's true or false, then it's no use for comproved or comparative judgment. But when it's more complex, creative problem solving, then you can gain something from a comparison. So I just want to say comparative judgment is not the only way to grade work of students. It's an additional way, and you have to look in your policy. Okay, where could it add something? So it will not just go in place of all other methods. So that's not the scope, but it can add you some value in those complex competences.
Okay. I see that Maud asks me if there's time for her question. I think you have to leave then, Maud, but maybe we can just take your question first. You would like to know how you justify the cutoff score, so the caesura of the compared text when you have the ranking.
So
is that your question, Maud?
Yes, it is, but I don't have to leave. But I was just looking at all the people that were waiting in line. So that's why I just posted my question, and you can answer it later. Then I'll just wait.
Okay, that's good then. Thank you very much for your question. I think Leonie, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is in terms of validity. Is there a minimum amount of assessors or minimum amount of texts?
Good question. For validity, we suggest the minimum of 4 assessors, because if you're 2 people and you're, for instance, working for 10 years together, then maybe you're look at the papers on exactly the same way. So it's only one view. So by 4 assessors, then there is more difference between the people, and that adds more to the validity. So yes, 4, but you can add more. If you're only with 3, it's also better than do it divide the work to 3 persons and use a rubric, for instance. So 4 people is for us the minimum. The minimum for works, that's more a reliability issue. You have to make a lot of comparisons, and below 20, it's not worth to, of you don't need that software. You can, by 10, you can do it by hand. Below 16, then you have to make exactly the same comparisons as you made before, and that will not add more information. So 20 works will be the minimum.
Okay, and follow-up question. 20 works in total, for example, for like 20 students.
Yes.
But my question was also, how many cycles do you have? I'm not sure how to phrase the question, but how many comparisons do you have to make?
Okay, if you're using it in a summative way, then you're aiming for a reliability of 0.70, then every text should be compared 15 times. If you're doing it in a formative way, then the reliability of the rank order is not that important. It's for the learning effect of seeing examples of building up bottom-up the quality reference scheme. Then 4 to 5 is already enough to see a diverse spectrum of quality. So if you make 4 to 5 comparisons, people or students will read 8 to 10 texts, and that's enough to see a lot of differences between qualities.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
We have also a question from Sander in the chat, who asks whether you researched adaptive comparative judgment as well. Sander, would you like to explain that a little bit more in more detail?
Yeah, that's fine. Basically, an algorithm generates pairs where there's a lot of discrepancy between assessors, or where there's very little discrepancy between assessors.
We choose for the random algorithm because of the inflation of the reliability of adaptive comparative judgment. If you're familiar with Bramley, he wrote a text on that. He researched that the first comparison in adaptive comparative judgment is very decisive. So if you lose in the first comparison, you end up in the lower part of the rank order. But imagine that you're seeing the 2 best texts, then one will lose and will end up low in the rank order. And it's very difficult for that text to move up. And you will stop because you have an indication of your reliability 0.80, 0.890, but that's an inflation of the true reliability. Therefore, we use a random algorithm. Now we are looking more into adaptive, but we first will analyze text on with NLP, and we will see, that's the PhD who will start in September. We'll see if that gains some speed, or is that a good way to go adaptive or not.
So I think that answers the questions for now. Maud, we will answer your question by sending you an email, I think. Martin, is that okay? Can you say something about where to place that? Or it might be an interesting question for everyone to answer.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's the rank order is relative. So you have to put on your objective caesur or tipping point afterwards. You can decide it in group. Okay, this one is the middle one, or you can add some benchmarks. If you're certain about works from the year before, you graded them together, and okay, this is a 2, a 4, a 6, and 8. You just put them into the batch, and then they will end up in the rank order, and then you can see you have a benchmark, and you can grade all the rest. Also in Comproved, we can translate the rank order into grades. So you have to grade 2 works, and we can calculate all the rest. So by 20 works, that's maybe not that difficult to do, but if you have 200 students, you only have to grade 2, and the other ones are calculated by Comproved. And there is also one thing: you can just add a paper which state sufficient. That's the only word, sufficient. And in the comparison, then you decide that the work is sufficient for you or not. And the paper sufficient will also appear on the rank order, and that's a good indication of the consensus of the tipping point. And then maybe you can give that a 5, choose another one. Okay, this is a 7 or an 8, and then the rest is calculated. So the objective a norm is put afterwards on the rank order.
I can see that this makes Roel very happy somehow.
I had the same questions. I'm very happy with this answer. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, you're asking all the questions I had in my mind as well when I first heard about this program. So maybe it's a good time now for me to show what we did with it at the Center for Languages and Academic Skills. So I'm going to share my part of the slides with you, and I hope that that somehow works out well. I think I learned about, well, it was then called DPAC still, it's now changed into Comproved, which I think is really a better name.
Thank you.
And I met a few researchers into the DPAC, formerly DPAC project on a conference. And they talked about this program, and I was immediately very enthusiastic. And then I became an education fellow for the TU Delft, and I had a little bit of money to do some fun things with. And one of those fun things was that we had the opportunity during the COVID period to have an account for Comproved to try it out. To tell you a little bit about our context, some of you already know me maybe, but some of you don't. I am a coordinator of the communicative skills teachers at the Center for Languages and Academic Skills here at TPM faculty. There's 22 lecturers that give academic writing and scientific and report writing all over campus in many different study programs. And we usually do that to very large cohorts of students. For example, in the year that we used Comproved, we had a cohort of 607 students from mechanical engineering who were taking a course in technical writing, technical report writing. Aerospace engineering, we had 326 students who were writing a paper, a scientific paper, in groups of 10 students. And we had, for example, a life science and technology cohort of 192 students who wrote individual papers. So quite a lot of work to grade, and we were just curious to see what we could do with Comproved. So we did a pilot with well, not really a test account, but we had they had a very nice opportunity we could have the account for a little less money because it was COVID time. So that was nice. I could pay it out of my education fellow money. And it was I had to really put in some effort to have it available because, you know, there's all the issues with using tools at TU Delft. So I had a lot of help there from Frans Broos at my faculty. And also in the end, we could use the single sign-on with the NetID to give students and instructors access to the program, which was really very easy. You just choose TU Delft, and then you can just log in with your NetID, and that makes things very easy and nice. So we used it mainly for formative assessment in 3 study programs. For mechanical engineering. We had students compare title pages of reports. The first thing that people see when they pick up a report is that first title page, the front page. So we had people compare that, but we also had them compare the whole design report, which is quite a large piece of text. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the difficulties that students had with that. Remember, though, that these are first-year bachelor students. I think that's also telling a little bit about motivation when it comes to writing. Then we had in aerospace engineering the introduction of a design report. So that was only 1 page of text that people had to compare. And we had in life science and technology a lab report of approximately 4 pages. So that was already a bit of a lengthy text. I will show you some examples of the mechanical engineering texts that we had students compare, and I chose the example of the front pages of the reports. Apologies for the fact that this is in Dutch, but you see here what students scored as the best one and the not so good one. So the not so good one is on the left. And maybe you already saw that with one glance, and the better one was, or what a student scored as the best one was the one on the right. So you immediately see the difference there. And I had to, of course, anonymize the names of the students and the lecturers that were involved here, but this gives you a bit of an idea. And then when we had the students do these comparisons, we came up with a reliability score of 0.94, which is quite high, I think. We did not use this for summative purposes, but only for formative purposes. So this is what it looked like on my end of the test we did. This is what students did not see, but they could see this. They could see how their group ended up on the curve. So here you see the names of the groups. I think that's not a problem to show because you just don't know who's in those groups. And you can see that there were 90 groups who submitted the front page of the report. And then every individual student had to score a number of those title pages to see which ones they thought was best. So that is a bit of what it looked like. And we also asked the students in this mechanical engineering course what they thought about the use of Comproved. We presented 4 statements about the 2 assignments that we had them do, so the title page comparison and the whole report. There were 378 students who actually gave their opinion on these statements, and the statements were, I think Comproved was user-friendly. I think I learned from the feedback on Comproved. I think I learned from seeing other reports on Comproved, and I would advise to keep using Comproved for technical writing. So what were the results of that? Again, sorry, it's in Dutch, but the first statement, I think Comproved was user-friendly. You can see that, well, most of them agreed with that. So it's going from strongly disagree on top to strongly agree on the bottom of the graph here. So overall, you can see that on all statements, they mostly agreed or very much agreed, and very much would also advise us to keep using Comproved for the technical writing. Of course, we also gave them the opportunities to give some comments on the use of Comproved, and I just curved them counted what they said about that. And as I already expected, they had the most problems they had was with the amount of time it took them to compare those whole reports with one another. First year bachelor students, they are not very keen on having to read a lot. So they said this was really a bit of a problem. It costs them too much time. They found it too much work. They had to compare too many reports. They also struggled a bit, I can see in the comments, with the interface, the fact that they had to scroll through the whole text to be able to compare them. That was difficult for them. Some of them reported on the fact that the feedback was contrasting, and that they found that a bit confusing. I can imagine that, yeah, this is like the real life, right? When you are peer reviewed, when you write a paper, you will also sometimes have contrasting feedback. So that's nothing new. Of course, they also saw that some of the feedback that was given was just incorrect or unclear, or they saw that people just did not spend much time on it. Many of them commented on that. Again, too much text to compare and too much feedback. They felt, this is overwhelming. I get so many results. And one thing I should explain with this as well is that we used rubrics. So I think that's one of the mistakes that we made in using Comproved. I think it's stronger if you just have people say, what is a strong point of this text and what can you see that can be improved? So that will reduce the time that they have to spend on giving the feedback, and then you get this more holistic approach to giving the feedback. Of course, they also had some positive remarks. They found it useful to see other people's reports, and they felt it was nice to see the score, and they felt it was nice to use. So some very positive things as well. And I also have some, sorry, again, in Dutch, some literal quotes of students, which also sometimes show that spelling is still difficult for the first year bachelor students. Note the words in red. But one of them said, I really thought it was so very much not chill. So that was a person who was not very happy with it, but many very positive remarks as well. So it was, it gave a good overview. One person said, we really were helped with the peer review that we received. It was a very good option. It was nice to use. One person even said, I don't think there's a program that works better. So I don't know which comparison he made with the program, but that was interesting. It was handy. And one person said, fantastic. And I'm not really sure whether that was meant in a cynical way, but let's take the optimist view here. So this is how we used it in our situation. Because it was COVID, we just didn't have a lot of time to do research on it, to think about other ways to do it. We tried it out among colleagues first, so to get used to the program, to find out what it works like. Almost all my colleagues wrote a little piece of text, and then we compared that. That was fun as well. Yeah, overall, I think it was really a very nice program to be able to use specifically for smaller parts of text, or you could always, use other things. You could use videos of presentations. You can maybe compare posters or pieces of code. I think it has many opportunities. And we felt that it worked very smoothly. There were no technical glitches. It is possible to insert groups. So group work was facilitated very easily. There's a very good manual that I'm really very happy with in Dutch and in English. So for the TU Delft context, that comes in very handy. And I think the support was great as well. And then Martin and I had a conversation after we tried it out about how we use it. And apparently we did, very many things wrong, because we have these rubrics, and we should stop maybe using those, just rely on, or maybe, not have too many criteria as we had, but also maybe rely a bit more on that people are able to judge things when they are comparing. And I would like to be able to investigate that in a bit more depth. But for that to happen, we would have to have access to the program again, because, we had it only for 1 year. And now our opportunity to use it that way is gone. So we have to find out whether that is a possibility. And I'm going to talk to people about that as well, to see how we can make that happen maybe. But I would be very interested to find out whether you have any other questions about this, whether you would be interested in using it. And I saw that many people already posted their email address on the Padlet. So those of you who have posted their email address there, Martin will give you access to a demo version of the program so that you can play around a little bit yourself, right, Martin? Yeah. Any other questions for now? Don't see anyone. Or discussion points, or?
I think we have a question from Marcel. Marcel?
Yes, I would just like a clarification question about the process of the grading or comparison. So it's clear that multiple people should be involved, but it was not completely clear to me whether every person has to go through every single piece of text or not. Okay,
No.
that's great. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so for example, we had, I don't know, 170, somewhere around that, LST students who uploaded their lab report. And then we asked them to make a comparison of, I don't know exactly what the number was, but let's say that they had to compare 4 times 2 texts. So they wouldn't have seen all the texts, but only 8 texts. But because every student in that cohort was involved in doing this, all the texts were viewed a number of times by different assessors. So That gives you really a quite nice idea about what you can improve in your text.
Okay, thank
Does
you.
that answer your
Yes.
question?
Yeah, it does. We're wondering because of the iterator reliability if different people rate different texts and
Yeah.
how that works. But if that works in your experience, that's great.
Yeah. I think that iterator reliability is specifically very important when you're using it for summative purposes. So actually for the grading, when you're using it for formative purposes to give students a better insight and to activate their reflective abilities about what they wrote and how they did that. That really works very well. And as I said, we haven't had the opportunity or taken the opportunity to do in-depth research about that, but from the coordinator at the LST program, Life Science and Technology, she told me that many students told her that they really liked to be able to see what other people wrote and how they wrote it. So they really opened up some of the documents on the curve, because you can choose that, right? You can show the curve to them, and then you can choose whether you give them access to the different papers. So they can click on an example, they can click on the best example on the curve and see what that person has written and was it actually as good as people think it was. And then they think maybe, okay, so let's take one in the middle where I ended up. So how does that one compare to my text? And by taking a look at other people's examples that way, it's the same effect as in peer reviewing. There's a lot of research on that, on how the person who gives the feedback also very much benefits from doing that, but also the comparing itself activates those reflective processes. Well, long answer to your question, but Juliet.
Yeah, well, what stood out most in your presentation for me was that you said we had to leave the rubric out. We had to do away with the rubric in order to make the right comparisons for students in a formative situation, right?
Yeah, we should have done that, but we didn't.
We should have done. Okay. Because when I'm thinking of working with a program like this, and I haven't had the experience, of course, I think that it would be a pitfall for me to turn to the rubric and to use the rubric as a justification for my assessment, for assessing the paper A, the better one, in comparison to paper B. So it seems to me it's very difficult to do away with the rubric. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can imagine that, because we want to have, we have the idea that a rubric, using a rubric, helps us to be as objective as possible.
Right.
And that's a false idea. Because, and I think that Juliet is my direct colleague, so for other people, we saw that in a session that we had a few months ago as well, when we were looking at one piece of text with many different people, and we use a rubric, and we had very different grades coming out of that session, right? So what you see is that people have a kind of internal grading system as well, in which they put a higher weight on one criterion and a lower weight on another criterion. And if you're not agreed on those weights, then using a rubric is not reliable at all. So you need to externalize the weight that people give to the different points in the rubric. And then you have to make sure that people are not in a sneaky way still putting more weight on the aspects that they feel are more important. So by just taking that out of the equation and taking a more holistic view and relying on the fact that when more people take a look at more examples, that you will have a good outcome and a fair outcome, I feel. That might work as well, but you have to let go of some of your ideas there, and that's hard. I agree. Yeah. Does that answer your question,
Yes,
Juliet?
it does. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add something. So, what was I just to say? The rubric is internalized in your head, so you will use it, but in comparative judgment, you are allowed to use it your own way. So it's your expertise, and it's all expertise of all the assessors that is taking into account. So if you have a different weighting in your head, that's not a problem. That starts to be a problem if you are the only one who looks at the paper. Then it's only your view and your weighting. But if my weighting is different and I also look at the same paper and I give my opinion, then it's more, it becomes objective because of all those things are taken into account, and not only you for this and this and this paper and only mine for that and that and that paper. And that's the big affordance of using comparative judgment. I also want to add more on the feedback. Maybe we have 3 opportunities. The first opportunity is tips and tops, so your strengths and weaknesses. The other is on criteria, but then that's more for structuring the feedback for students. And there we state use no more than 5, just the big components of the competence. 5 is more than enough. And sometimes we see criteria like, do they use all so that's something that you can count, and those criteria don't help you, because then it's difficult. Oh, this one has 3 and this one has 4, but the 3 is better than the 4, so then you make yourself difficult. So just go holistic. Okay, this one is better, and then you can give feedback on, okay, but you missed this criteria, you didn't use it, but okay, it's good, but maybe it will even be better if you use also this. And the third is comes from feedback seeking literature, is that you can provide a lot of feedback, and you need also say it was overwhelming sometimes, and then people stop using feedback. But if you let them ask themselves feedback, so if a student hand in his or her paper or work, they can, if you can allow them to ask their own feedback question. I just want to have feedback on style. I just want to have feedback on structure. I just whatever. So, and there's a big chance that they will go and look at that specific feedback, and then maybe they also will look at the other feedback, because they're looking at the feedback. So yes, this is the view that a student will see. So you see the project, the feedback of other students, and here you can see the specific feedback. So this student wrote the wrong question, and it can be added on top of the feedback you ask as a teacher. So you ask as a teacher tips and tops, and you allow the student to ask their own feedback question. So that's also possible.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're somewhat at the end of the session, right, Naomi?
Yes, we definitely are. And I will share out the recording in Twitter and LinkedIn. But I do want to mention that this is the very last one of this series as far as the remote teaching and learning. I currently am in 3 departments and I'm starting my PhD. So this was originally set up for the COVID times. And since we're hopefully never going back to lockdown, we'll probably reshape this into a different form involving some more PhD students and candidates, but in one of the other departments, essentially, that I'm slowly moving into as far as my PhD. So that's just kind of, you'll see something in the future possibly, and we'll keep you posted, but we may start something different in this fall in a similar fashion to what you see here, because I know that some of the lecturers have discussed that they like this space, but it will just be reshaped possibly in the fall. So thank you all for joining us so often here on Wednesdays in the mornings. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Well, thank you, Naomi, for facilitating all these wonderful sessions. And Sander, I
Yeah.
see that you have another question. Please contact me if you want to, okay? So that we can talk about things.
Right.
Thank you all very much for being here.